Michael Salinas Jr. of Alburquerque, New Mexico, was just a typical, run of the mill, interesting teenager, age 15, now approximately 17, 17 years old. And he shot and killed someone in a park in New Mexico. You would wonder what would happen with a teenager like this, whether they would go on perhaps to have an aspiring sports career, perhaps to do something very inventive in the world, perhaps to fund a new project, in New Mexico, for example. But instead, Michael Salinas Jr. chose to take someone's life right inside the Westgate Park, right in front of a whole live audience of more than 500 people. And so here it is. This is a very important case to me. So look forward to this up next on JTC channel. Michael Salinas. Thank you. Albuquerque, New Mexico. 15-year-old Michael Salinas Jr. is officially charged with murder for a shooting at the Westgate Park. 15-year-old Michael Salinas Jr. Has been arrested and charged with the murder that follows a February 2022 shootout at Westgate Park, which killed one and injured three other people. Albuquerque police say Michael Salinas Jr. was taken into custody this morning in South Valley. Salinas is accused of planning an altercation with another person at the park after the basketball game in Volcano Vista High School. Police state that as the vehicle with four arrived in the actual park, Michael Salinas chose to fire 17 rounds, which killed Vincent Phuc Loc and injured three others. 13 shots were also fired back at Salinas from the victim's car. And says it was in South Valley. So there are gangs in that area. There certainly are, but it's like when I look at this overall and as I have examined that area, it really feels like we are missing something simple. I believe Michael Salinas Jr. Was set off by some kind of extenuating circumstance. I think he had a particular issue with certain people there, and I believe that he took it to an extreme level. But I've looked at that area in South Valley, and that's not the best neighborhood. But I believe that the warning signs were certainly there. And the lesson is for all of us is, we need to not ignore these kind of warning signs with these youth. If they are acting out with certain behaviors, we need to take that very seriously, and we need to take them at their word that they will do something, like what has been seen here. And he was also arrested before, apparently, in an area of New Mexico on a robbery charge. So it's just interesting. I feel like he was exhibiting these signs and wasn't, particularly explosive, but it just begs the question of what was the town doing to really reach these youth, to reach people like Michael Salinas Jr. Since his main problem that he had with some of these people seems to just be, dealing with their ethnic background and similar things like that. There's reports that he had been fairly explosive in a few other scenarios that happened earlier in the year. So I can't definitively say totally what caused this, but I can tell you, it's good for everybody to weigh in and, just go ahead and get this story out there. And I feel like there's quite a few things left that we can learn about the fact that these youth sometimes they get involved with dangerous people. They get involved with these friends and so on, but these friends in many cases are probably an accomplice to a crime in some way or another. And so we should take these warnings very, very literally, and we should follow up on them and contact people who we can reach in our area. Contact the local therapist clinic, but contact them directly ourselves. That's what I encourage you guys to do when you are, able to. Contact people in your area who can really make a difference and let them know about this case. Let them know, that we need to intervene with these kinds of issues. And especially in New Mexico, in places like that, because it is unusual. And people are right to think that there is something that sets it off. Because, Michael Salinas, despite what he did, he wasn't really a very violent child or anything, in this background history, if you look it up. And so there needs to be more intervention. So I appreciate you guys, continue to get this out there, press for it, for people to really take note of this case. And until next time, right here, JTC channel. Thank you. He was accused of setting up basically a planned kind of ambush or attack, in other words, with an accomplice that he met at the park. And this was to take place directly after the high school basketball game. As the vehicle with four approached the park, Michael Salinas exited his Mustang and fired 17 shots, killing Vincent Lee and injuring 3 others inside the car. Someone from the victim's car fired 13 shots directly at Salinas in retaliation. Homicide detectives learned from witnesses that occupants of the victim's car encountered Michael Salinas earlier on the night of February 26th, 2022 again, during a game at Volcano Vista High School. The group stated they had an ongoing beef with Salinas. They agreed to meet Michael Salinas at Westgate Community Park, located at 10812 Rio Puerco Trail, Southwest. Analysts with APD's Digital Intelligence Unit used phone and social media records that they could gather to corroborate details of the crime scene, as well as the events that occurred prior, during, and after the actual shootout at 9 p.m. APD's spot shotter technology was also used to pinpoint the number of shots they fired. So, in other words, this was not a simple argument between 2 former friends. This was a premeditated attack. And Michael Salinas directly desired to harm Vincent in that way. He had exhibited some racist tendencies. I'm not going to get into the detail of what kind, but he had definitely some deep-seated racist thoughts in mind, and that's part of why this tragedy occurred. And it's just always terrible when things like, it didn't really have any reason that could be seen for disagreement. It says that they were in the park and they were having an argument, and Michael Salinas was having an argument with Mr. Vincent Phuc. But, that doesn't rise to the level of I need to turn around and shoot someone or anything else. I mean, people typically, particularly in high school, will, occasionally get into disagreements and things like that. That is expected, of course. But this goes beyond that. And so I wanted to cover this case briefly here. There are some key issues around Michael Salinas, or Salinas as it were, and the behavior, with how the behavior comes across and how it is, exhibited in public. He just came up to Phuc Loc as though this was no real issue, and he just decided to take out a firearm or take out a weapon. And there are parts of this that are a little bit odd. He's certainly not in the vein of a serial killer. But the behavior here is really not understandable. I mean, who does that? Who gets, at least today, who gets into a disagreement like that, like a brief high school spat, as it were, and then pulls out an unregistered gun? I'm just pointing out there are a lot of things we need to learn about these kind of interactions that people are having, whether they're in public places, or even at the park, and sometimes even on the basketball courts. And the way Michael Salinas has been going for a while is kind of not in the proper direction for being able to resolve creative differences, as it were. And I'd like to examine that for a moment. I'd like to kind of peel that back to examine why that is. He had never shot anyone before, and in this particular instance, because he did not like Vincent, he shot him 17 times. And I realize the Salinas name is very much associated with the Salinas cartel of Mexico and so forth, and that's very important to get that up front and get that very crystal clear. But at the same time, it does not excuse, and it certainly does not ever explain truly why Michael Salinas Jr. decided to go into that park and do what he did. And I get that he has issues sometimes with other people in his environment, or people on the basketball team, but some of the behaviors here are what I'd like to zero in on this. He was very kind of abrasive. He had not known Vincent Phuc for very long, apparently, and some of his earlier colleagues describe him as very, very almost confrontational, that sort of thing. And I just as far as it being, a quiet community, the Westgate Park is normally fairly quiet. And yeah, the neighborhood isn't the best, but it's tragic that it occurred at the Westgate Community Park. And so I appreciate, you guys continuing to really spread the word on this important issue, and let's get the family of the victim, Vincent's family, let's get them the recognition they deserve. Thank you again. There's a little more to this. So for me, I always like to get into the background with certain things like this. I like to explore a little bit why certain things happen the way they do. And Michael Salinas Jr. is, another perfect example of that. His father, and what appears to very possibly be his literal father, is on Instagram, and he posts with who appears to be, at least from where I'm standing, appears to be Michael Michael Salinas Jr. And similar things. And when I go there and I check out that area and I look at just what type of people they are, and so on, Um, Salinas has multiple felony charges for aggravated assault, you know, assault from a moving vehicle and similar things. And these are all confirmed assaults, confirmed to have occurred. And, I'm perfectly within my legal rights, of course, to always look at that because I like to get behind the truth of certain matters. And so, this is where they essentially lived, or may have lived anyway, because that's, what I'm allowed to say. And being in this area, you can see it's just a very strange kind of area. The playground in the area doesn't seem to have anybody visiting that very often. The park here is abandoned. They just don't seem to have a very cozy community. And that's my honest opinion on the matter. It's kind of a mobile trailer park type of place, I guess. And so I see where some of the characteristics in relationship to the murders and things that have gone on in New Mexico, just of this overall area and its history, which can sometimes play as a contributing factor a lot of times in the growth and development of certain uh, individuals, certain youth in particular. And in the case of Mr. Michael Salinas Jr., I just feel that it's important for us to always consider that and consider that possibility. Because although someone is not shaped internally by, just conflicts or simple situations that they go through uh, in their life as far as their environment goes, it does play a large part in how certain people turn out in the long run as well. And the environment is, a very important thing. And since this was a kind of run-down trailer park style area, I just am not really that surprised at the kind of development of Mr. Michael Salinas and what he ended up doing in that regard. But I just feel that there's a lot that we can still learn from these particular scenarios and so on. So I appreciate you guys being here and just continue to get the word out on this case. There's not really that many who are continuing to talk about this or who have even heard of the Michael Salinas case. He apparently was found guilty of nearly 2 or more murders because he had shot 3 other people. And this was in just the Alburquerque, New Mexico area, outside of South Valley or South County there. Thank you. Important that we truly begin to recognize these signs much earlier. And some of the behavior of Michael Salinas is certainly questionable in that sense. I think if people had known that he was kind of addicted to, certain video games and so on, and certain things like that, and didn't really know how to talk out his problems, talk out his disagreements with other classmates, as it were, I think that it would have gone a long way towards people really understanding him and being able to prevent these kinds of tragic events from ever taking place. And so, I wanted to emphasize this because it's an important case for me as well. And nearly no one has heard about this case, believe it or not. So I'm going to be covering a few details here. And as always, I appreciate you guys, going ahead and getting this out, getting it to the general audience and to the mass public so they can weigh in on this. important issue. I think that he actually exhibited some warning signs as far as uh, antisocial personality disorder, things like that. And you can't ever understate that. You can't underestimate issues that are serious like that. So, uh, I'd like to say this was like one of the only times, but there's a number of other examples where this has gone on. And I needed to point out there was a degree of racism in this shooting, meaning Michael Salinas, he's normally a fairly put together guy, and he was against Vincent Phuc Loc because of his ethnicity. His ethnicity again, it's like there was an undercurrent of racism to these types of issues, and that's what I want to focus in on for a minute. And this is a rough area. There's no question, but I just do not agree that that makes it an excuse for someone like this to go off the handle, at the local Westgate Park. So thank you again. A little more on this. Thank you. So this is another very important case. And a case update for this case. This specific case being referenced only occurred within the past 2.5 weeks. So it's very, very recent. And even fewer have heard of this case. So I appreciate, you guys to just keep on spreading the word, especially on cases like this. Alburquerque, New Mexico. The 15-year-old Alburquerque boy was taken into custody on Friday in relation to a fatal shooting that happened in February. Michael Salinas, or Salinas Jr., is charged with an open count of murder for killing Vincent Phuc Loc at the Westgate Park on February 26th. Police state that Michael Salinas set up a planned fight and altercation with another person at the park following a basketball game in their local high school gym. As a vehicle with 4 people inside approached the park officially, police state Salinas got out of his car, he fired 17 shots and killed Lee while also injuring 3 others that were inside the vehicle. Officials say someone in the victim's car fired 13 shots at Michael Salinas. He was not struck. Witnesses have told detectives that people in Lee's car ran into Salinas earlier that night at a game at the Volcano Vista High School. The group states they had an ongoing beef with Salinas, and they agreed to meet at the park after the game to see what they could discuss. Phone and social media records match the detectives' investigation into the events that lead up to and also during the shooting, which occurred before 9 p.m. Michael Salinas was booked into the Bernalillo County Juvenile Center. So this is an important case as well because this is someone who committed murder, and that's a very big deal, especially when they are 15, or 16 years old. And this one is just, they're on the wrong path. And that's what truly needs to be recognized about this, especially in cases such as this one. Michael Salinas Jr.